For 15 years I've sacrificed everything to keep my family afloat financially after Dad's accident. Yesterday at Mom's birthday I discovered they've been hiding something from me. My name is Jack and I'm 31 years old. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but I honestly don't know where else to turn. None of my friends would understand, and I definitely can't talk to my family about it. Maybe putting this out into the void will help me process everything that's happened. It all started when I was 16. My dad was in construction, a foreman for a big company that built commercial properties. He was the kind of guy who never missed a day of work, who took pride in providing for his family. Mom was a part-time receptionist at a dental office, but Dad was our main breadwinner. My younger sister Ella was 13, and my brother Mike was only 10. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Dad had plans for all of us to go to college, had been saving for years. Then came the accident. Dad was overseeing a site when a support beam collapsed. He survived, but his spine was damaged. The doctor said he'd never walk again. I remember sitting in that sterile hospital waiting room, the smell of antiseptic burning my nostrils, watching my mother's face crumple as the doctor explained his prognosis. I was just a kid, but in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. Like some invisible weight had been placed on my shoulders. Dad's company provided some compensation, and there was insurance, but it wasn't enough. Not for the specialized care he needed, not for the modifications to our house, not for 3 kids with college dreams. Mom tried picking up more hours at the dental office, but with Dad needing care, it was hard for her to be away from home for long. I was in my junior year of high school, getting ready to apply to colleges. I had decent grades, was on the track team. Nothing spectacular, but I had dreams of going away to state, maybe studying business or engineering. But watching my parents at the kitchen table night after night, bills spread out between them, their voices low but tense, I knew what I had to do. I got a job at the local grocery store, bagging and stocking shelves after school and on weekends. I gave most of my paycheck to my parents, keeping just enough for gas for our ancient Honda Civic that became mine when Dad couldn't drive anymore. When I graduated high school, instead of going away to college, I enrolled in community college and picked up a second job at an auto parts store. I told myself it was temporary, just until things stabilized. But things never really stabilized. Dad's medical expenses were ongoing. The insurance company kept finding ways to deny claims. Mom eventually had to quit her job entirely to care for him. So I quit community college after my associate's degree and took a full-time position at the auto parts chain. It wasn't what I dreamed of, but it paid better than my other options, and the manager was understanding when I needed time off for family emergencies. Meanwhile, Ella and Mike were growing up. I was determined they wouldn't have to sacrifice their futures the way I had. So I lived at home, paid rent to my parents, covered Ella's college application fees, bought Mike's school supplies and sports equipment. When Ella got accepted to her dream school 4 states away, I co-signed her student loans because my parents' credit was shot from medical debt. When she needed money for books or couldn't make rent on her off-campus apartment, I was the one who sent her cash. Mike was a different story. He struggled in school after Dad's accident, acting out, getting in trouble. I'd pick him up from detention, talk to his teachers, try to get him back on track. I paid for tutors when he was falling behind in math and science. When he decided college wasn't for him and wanted to try trade school instead, I covered those costs too. Through all this, I put my own life on hold. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious ever developed. How could it? What woman wants a guy who lives with his parents at 25, who can't make plans because he might need to drive Dad to a doctor's appointment, who can't save for his own future because he's paying his sister's phone bill and his brother's car insurance? I got promoted at work, eventually becoming the regional manager for 5 stores. The money was better, but the hours were longer. Still, it meant I could help more. I started a dedicated account for my parents' expenses, making sure their mortgage was always paid on time, that they never had to worry about utilities being shut off or prescriptions going unfilled. All this time, I told myself it was temporary. That once Ella graduated and got a job, once I completed trade school and started earning, things would ease up. I'd be able to think about my own life again. Maybe go back to school, finish my bachelor's degree. Maybe find someone, start my own family. But that's not how it played out. Ella graduated with honors in psychology, then decided to go for her master's degree. More loans, more expenses. She talked about how she'd be able to help the family once she was a licensed therapist, but that was years away. Mike completed his electrician certification, but struggled to find steady work. He'd get a job, lose it, move back home, find another job. Each cycle, I'd help him with rent deposits, new work boots, whatever he needed to get back on his feet. Through all this, my parents were grateful, at least outwardly. Mom would cook my favorite meals when I came over, which was most nights since I still handled a lot of Dad's evening care. Dad would tell me how proud he was of me, how I'd stepped up in ways he never expected. But there was something in his eyes sometimes, a flash of resentment, maybe? I understood. It couldn't be easy for him, watching his son take over the role he'd always filled. I never complained, not really. Sure, there were moments alone in my apartment. I'd finally moved out at 27, though I was still at their house almost daily, when I'd look at my life and wonder how I'd ended up here. Friends from high school were married with kids, had traveled, had careers they'd chosen rather than fallen into. I had a job that paid the bills, not just mine, but everyone else's too. But I kept going, because what else could I do? They were my family. They needed me. And I'd made peace with my choices, or so I thought. Then came Mom's 60th birthday last weekend. I'd been planning it for months. Rented a private room at her favorite restaurant, invited all her friends, her sister from out of town. I'd spent a small fortune on catering, decorations, a professional photographer. I wanted it to be special for her, wanted to see her smile without worry lines for once. The party was going well. Mom was beaming, Dad was in good spirits despite being uncomfortable in his wheelchair for so long. Ella had flown in from her graduate program, looking polished and professional. Mike had even shown up on time, recently employed again and wearing a new button-down shirt I'd bought him last Christmas. After dinner, while the server was setting up for cake, I headed to the restaurant's bathroom. As I was returning, I passed by a small alcove where the coats were hung. I heard my name and paused. It was Ella and Mike, voices low. "Jack's gone all out again," Ella was saying. "Think he's compensating for something?" Mike laughed. "Probably. You know how he is, Mr. Responsible. Makes the rest of us look bad. Mom feels guilty, you know. She was talking to me about it yesterday, how Jack's given up so much." "She shouldn't feel guilty," Mike said. "It's not like Dad's settlement wasn't enough. Jack chose to martyr himself." I froze. "Settlement? What settlement?" "I know," Ella continued, oblivious to my presence just around the corner. "But you know Mom and Dad never wanted us to feel like a burden. That's why they never told Jack how much they actually got. Let him think they were struggling more than they were. Well, it worked out for all of us, didn't it? I got trade school, you got your fancy degrees, they got their bills paid, and Jack got to feel like the big hero." "Don't be cruel," Ella said, but she was laughing too. "Besides, it's not like they're rich. The money's mostly gone now anyway, between investments that didn't pan out and helping us." "And the cabin," Mike added. "Yeah, and the cabin. Though that was probably a good investment. Property values up there have skyrocketed." "Cabin? What cabin?" My mind was racing, trying to process what I was hearing. There was a settlement, a significant one from the sound of it. Enough that my parents hadn't been as desperate as they'd led me to believe. Enough that they'd bought a cabin somewhere, A second property I knew nothing about. I must have made a noise, because suddenly they both looked over and saw me standing there. The color drained from Ella's face. "Jack," she said, her voice strained. "How long have you been there?" I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, my chest hollow. 15 years. 15 years I'd been killing myself to keep our family afloat, sacrificing everything, believing we were one emergency away from financial ruin. And they'd been lying to me. "What settlement?" I finally managed to ask. "What cabin?" Mike looked at Ella, then back at me. "Bro, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" My voice was rising, and I made an effort to lower it, aware of the party just rooms away. "Because it sounds like Dad got a settlement you all knew about, while I've been working myself to death thinking we were struggling." "Not all of us knew," Ella said quickly. "I only found out when I needed money for graduate school. Mom and Dad sat me down and explained that they had some money set aside from Dad's accident settlement." "And you didn't think to tell me? After everything I've done?" "They asked me not to," she said, her eyes pleading. "They said you were so set in taking care of everyone, they didn't want to hurt your pride." "My pride?" I almost laughed. "I gave up college for this family. I've been working 60-hour weeks for years. I haven't had a real vacation since Dad's accident. And you think this is about my pride?" Mike stepped forward. "Jack, come on. You chose to do all that. No one forced you." I stared at him, this brother I'd bailed out of trouble countless times, whose trade school I'd paid for out of my own pocket. I chose it because I thought there was no other option. Because every time I turned around, someone in this family needed money, and Mom and Dad acted like they were choosing between medication and groceries. "It wasn't all an act," Ella said softly. "The medical bills were real. Dad's care is expensive. The settlement helped, but it wasn't endless." "But it was enough for a cabin," I said flatly. "And enough that they could have told me to focus on my own education instead of working 2 jobs during community college." They both fell silent, and in that silence, I felt years of resentment bubbling up inside me. Not just about the money, but about the deception. About being made to feel like everything depended on me, when they'd had options I knew nothing about. "I need to talk to Mom and Dad," I said finally. "Jack, wait," Ella grabbed my arm. "It's Mom's birthday. Don't ruin it for her." I looked at my sister, with her carefully highlighted hair and designer watch, things she claimed were gifts from friends, but now I wondered, and felt a surge of anger. But she was right about one thing. I wouldn't ruin Mom's party. I'd waited 15 years, I could wait a few more hours. "Fine," I said, pulling my arm from her grasp, "but tomorrow, we're all going to have a conversation." I went back to the party, plastered on a smile, and got through the cake and presents. Mom hugged me tightly, whispering thanks for making her day so special. Dad shook my hand, his grip still strong despite everything, telling me I was a good son. I nodded, said all the right things, but inside I was screaming. After the party, I drove home to my modest apartment, the one I could barely afford because so much of my income went to helping my family. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the sacrifices I'd made, all the opportunities I'd passed up. The study abroad program I'd been accepted to but couldn't attend. The woman I'd been serious about who eventually left because I had no time for a relationship. The promotions I'd turned down because they would have required relocation. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in years and drove to my parents' house. Ella was staying there during her visit, and I texted Mike to meet us there too. He protested, saying he had work, but I replied that he'd called in sick plenty of times before, once more wouldn't hurt. He arrived 20 minutes after I did, looking annoyed. We sat in the living room, the same room where I'd helped Dad do his physical therapy exercises, where I'd sat with Mom going through bill after bill. The same room where, apparently, they'd all been keeping secrets from me. "What's this about, Jack?" Mom asked, concerned. "Are you okay?" "No," I said simply. "I'm not okay. I overheard Ella and Mike talking at your party. About Dad's settlement. About a cabin I knew nothing about." The color drained from Mom's face. Dad looked down at his hands, unable to meet my eyes. "We wanted to tell you," Mom began, her voice trembling. "When?" I asked. "When were you going to tell me? After I'd worked myself into an early grave? After I'd given up every dream I ever had?" "It wasn't like that," Dad said, finally looking up. "The settlement wasn't as much as the kids are making it sound like. Yes, it was substantial, but with my ongoing care, it was never going to be enough for everything." "So you let me think we had nothing? You let me work 2 jobs while going to school. You let me believe that if I didn't help, we'd lose the house?" "We never said we'd lose the house," Mom protested weakly. "You didn't have to. Every time I came over, you were crying about bills. Every conversation was about what we couldn't afford. Meanwhile, you had enough to buy a cabin?" "The cabin was an investment," Dad said. "Your mother's brother suggested it. Property in that area was cheap then, and we used some of the settlement money as a down payment. The idea was to rent it out, generate some income." "And did it?" I asked. They exchanged glances. "Not as much as we'd hoped," Mom admitted. "The maintenance costs were higher than we expected, and then the housing market crashed, and we were underwater on the mortgage for years." "But you kept it," I pointed out. "Instead of selling it and using that money to, I don't know, tell your son he didn't have to support the entire family." "We were trying to think long term," Dad said. "The cabin is paid off now, and it's worth more than we paid for it. We always planned to sell it eventually, use the money for our retirement so we wouldn't be a burden on you kids." I laughed bitterly. "A burden? I've been carrying this family since I was 16 years old. I've already been burdened." "Jack, that's not fair," Ella cut in. "Mom and Dad did the best they could." I turned to her. "And what's your excuse? You knew about this and said nothing. You let me co-sign your student loans, send you money when you couldn't make rent." "I needed help," she said defensively. "My program is demanding, I can't work full-time." "I worked full-time while going to school," I reminded her. "I did what I had to do. And I would have done it anyway, Ella, if you'd been honest with me. But you took advantage." "That's not true." "Isn't it? You knew there was settlement money, yet you came to me first every time you needed something. Why? Because it was easier than asking Mom and Dad to dip into their savings?" She had no answer for that. I turned to Mike. "And you? I paid for your trade school. Every time you lost a job, who got you back on your feet? Who gave you money for rent, for food, for new work clothes? All while you knew there was other money available." "I didn't know until after trade school," he mumbled. "And by then, I was used to coming to you. You never said no." "Because I thought there was no one else." I exploded. "I thought if I didn't help, you'd end up on Mom and Dad's couch, adding to their burden. I thought I was the only thing standing between this family and disaster." The room fell silent. Mom was crying quietly, Dad looked older than I'd ever seen him, and my siblings couldn't meet my eyes. "Jack," Mom finally said, "we never meant to take advantage. We were grateful for your help, so grateful. We didn't want to deplete the settlement too quickly. We were afraid of what would happen if it ran out and your father needed more care than insurance would cover." "You could have told me that," I said, my voice hoarse. "We could have made decisions together, as a family. Instead, you decided I didn't deserve to know, that I should just keep sacrificing while the rest of you benefited." "It wasn't like that," Dad insisted. "We were trying to protect everyone's future. Yours included." "My future?" I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. "What future?" I'm 31 years old. I live in a one-bedroom apartment I can barely afford because so much of my money goes to this family. I haven't taken a vacation in years. I haven't finished my degree. I haven't had a serious relationship since Melissa left me because I was always working or here helping out. What future were you protecting, exactly? No one had an answer for that. I want to see the financial records, I said finally. All of them. The settlement documents, the cabin purchase, bank statements, everything. I want to know exactly what's been going on while I've been killing myself to keep us afloat. Jack, that's not necessary, Mom began. It is to me. I've handed over my paychecks, taken out loans, maxed out credit cards. I deserve to know what I've been subsidizing. Dad nodded slowly. You're right. You do deserve to know. We'll get everything together for you. I spent the next 3 hours going through their financial records. The settlement had been substantial, not millions, but several $100,000 after legal fees. They'd used some for immediate medical expenses and home modifications, then invested a portion and used another portion as a down payment on a small cabin in a lakeside community 2 hours away. Over the years, they dipped into the investment fund for various expenses, including helping Ella and Mike, but they'd kept a significant amount in reserve, for emergencies, Mom explained. Meanwhile, I'd been sending them money monthly, covering expenses I now realized they could have handled on their own. Not easily, perhaps, but they could have managed without pushing me to sacrifice everything. The cabin was now worth nearly twice what they'd paid for it. They'd used it occasionally themselves, let friends use it, even rented it out a few times, though not consistently enough to generate real income. They'd kept it a secret from me because, as Mom tearfully admitted, they knew I would have insisted they sell it to ease the financial pressure on the family, on me, specifically. By the time I finished going through everything, I felt numb. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated. They'd watched me struggle for 15 years, accepted my help, even asked for more when they knew they had other resources. I need some time, I said, standing up from the kitchen table where we'd spread out all the documents. I need to think about what this means. Jack, please, Mom reached for my hand, but I pulled away. We love you. We never meant to hurt you. But you did, I said simply. You all did. And right now, I don't know how to get past that. I walked out, ignoring their calls to come back, to talk more, to understand. I got in my car and drove, no destination in mind, just needing to be away. I ended up at a park near my apartment, sitting on a bench, watching families play, couples walk hand in hand, people living their lives, lives they'd chosen, not lives that had been thrust upon them through deception. I didn't go to my parents' house the next day, or the next. I went to work, came home, and tried to process everything. Ella called repeatedly, then texted when I didn't answer. Her messages ranged from apologetic to defensive, saying I was blowing things out of proportion, that they'd never meant to hurt me. Mike texted once, a brief sorry man, let's talk when you're ready. Mom called crying, leaving voicemails begging me to come over, to let them explain. Dad sent a single text, we made a mistake. I'm sorry. A mistake. 15 years of my life, reduced to a mistake. After a week, I finally responded to Ella, agreeing to meet her at a coffee shop near my place. She was flying back to her program the next day and was desperate to fix things before she left. She was waiting when I arrived, 2 coffees already on the table. She looked tired, her usual polished appearance somewhat dimmed. Jack, she said, standing to hug me. I allowed it but didn't return the embrace. I've been so worried about you. I needed time to think, I said, sitting down across from her. About what happens now. What do you mean, what happens now? Nothing has to change. We're still family. I looked at her, this sister I'd helped raise after Dad's accident, whose education I'd prioritized over my own. Everything has already changed, Ella. You just don't want to admit it. She sighed. I know you're hurt. I understand that. But try to see it from Mom and Dad's perspective. They were terrified after Dad's accident, terrified of running out of money if his condition worsened or if there were complications. I understand fear, I said. What I don't understand is deception. Or taking advantage of someone who's trying to help you. They didn't set out to deceive you, she insisted. At first, they really were struggling, settlement or not. The money wasn't available immediately, and there were so many expenses. By the time things stabilized, you'd already established yourself as the family provider. They were afraid of hurting your pride. Stop saying that, I said sharply. This was never about pride. It was about survival, mine and yours and theirs. I gave up everything because I thought we would drown otherwise. That's not pride, Ella. That's love and responsibility. She had the grace to look ashamed. You're right. I'm sorry. It's just. I don't know how to fix this. Neither do I admitted. But I know things can't go back to the way they were. What does that mean? It means I'm done subsidizing everyone's lives. I'm done being the safety net, the emergency fund, the backup plan. I need to focus on my own life now. Her eyes widened. But what about Mom and Dad? Dad's care is still expensive, and they have resources, I cut her off. They have the cabin they could sell. They have the investment account. And they have you and Mike. It's your turn to step up. Jack, that's not fair. I'm still in school, I can't. I was in school too, I reminded her. Didn't stop me from working full-time, from sending money home, from co-signing your loans. She fell silent, unable to argue against the truth. I'm not saying I'll never help again, I continued, softer now. But it will be on my terms, when I can afford it, not at the expense of my own future. And it will be based on honesty, not manipulation. What are you going to do? She asked. First, I'm going to talk to a financial advisor about my own situation. Years of supporting everyone else has left me with debt and no savings. I need to fix that. I took a sip of my coffee, which had grown cold. Then I'm going to look into finishing my bachelor's degree. My company has a tuition assistance program I've never used because I couldn't manage school with everything else. That's good, Jack. You should do that. I'm also moving, I continued. My lease is up next month, and I'm going to find a place farther from Mom and Dad. Somewhere where I'm not on call 24/7. She looked alarmed. But who will help them with Dad's care? His night transfers, his appointments? There are services for that. Home health aides, medical transport. They can afford it, Ella. They've always been able to afford it. They chose to use me instead because it was free. That's cruel, she protested. Is it? Or is it cruel to let your son think he's the only thing standing between his family and financial ruin, while you're maintaining a vacation property? She had no response to that. I should go, I said, standing. I have things to take care of. Jack, wait. She stood too, reaching for my arm. I am sorry. I should have told you when I found out about the settlement, about the cabin. I was selfish. I nodded, accepting her apology without explicitly forgiving her. Good luck with your program. I hope it goes well. Will you? Will you be at Thanksgiving? Mom's already planning it. I hesitated. I don't know. I need time, Ella. This isn't something I can just get over. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I understand. Just don't cut us off completely. We're still your family. We still love you. I love you too, I said, and meant it despite everything. But love shouldn't hurt like this. I left her there, walked back to my apartment, and for the first time in years, I felt lighter. The anger was still there, the betrayal still raw, but there was something else too, a sense of possibility, of a future that belonged to me alone. Over the next few weeks, I made good on my promises to myself. I met with a financial advisor who helped me create a plan to tackle my debt and start saving. I enrolled in online classes to complete my bachelor's degree. I found a new apartment in a different part of the city, further from my parents but closer to work, with a small patio where I could drink my morning coffee. I didn't cut my family off entirely. I still called to check on Dad, still visited occasionally, but I maintained firm boundaries. When Mom mentioned needing help with a bill, I gently reminded her of the investment account she and Dad had maintained. When Mike called asking for a loan for car repairs, I suggested he look into a payment plan with the mechanic. It wasn't easy. Years of being the family fixer had ingrained habits that were hard to break. Sometimes I lay awake at night wondering if I was being too harsh, if I should just forgive and forget. But then I'd remember the years of sacrifice, the opportunities missed, the deliberate deception, and I'd recommit to my new path. 6 months after discovering the truth, I was debt-free except for my student loans. My degree was progressing well, my new apartment felt like home, and I'd even started dating again, nothing serious yet, but it was nice to have time for that part of my life. I still hadn't been to the cabin. Mom had offered to take me there, suggesting it could be a family healing weekend. I'd declined. The cabin represented everything that had gone wrong, the secrets, the manipulation, the unfairness of it all. But then Dad's health took a turn. A pressure sore developed into an infection, and he was hospitalized for several days. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was serious, a reminder of his vulnerability. I visited him in the hospital, sat with Mom in the waiting room during a procedure. Ella flew in for the weekend, and even Mike showed up consistently, looking more mature than I'd seen him in years. During one visit, while Dad was sleeping, Mom asked to speak with me privately. We walked to the hospital cafeteria, got cups of watery coffee, and sat at a corner table. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said, her hands wrapped around her cup. "About everything that happened, about how we treated you." I nodded but said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "There's no excuse for what we did," she said. "We took advantage of your generosity, your sense of responsibility. We let you think things were worse than they were because it was easier than being honest." "Yes," I agreed. "You did." She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. "Your father and I have talked about it a lot. We're selling the cabin." I blinked, surprised. "You don't have to do that on my account." "We're not. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do. We found a buyer already, actually. The sale should be finalized next month." "That's good, I guess. If that's what you want." "What we want is to make things right with you," she said. "We can't undo the past 15 years. We can't give you back the opportunities you missed. But we can acknowledge the wrong we did and try to make amends." "How?" "The cabin is selling for more than we paid for it. We want to give you that money, Jack. All of it, to do whatever you want, finish your education, buy a house, travel, whatever dreams you had to set aside." I stared at her, stunned. "Mom, I can't take that." "You can, and you should. It's not a gift, it's restitution. For years of your life that we took without fully acknowledging what we were asking of you." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to refuse, to maintain the moral high ground. But another part recognized this for what it was, a genuine attempt to make amends, to acknowledge the sacrifice I'd made. "Think about it," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "The offer stands, regardless of what you decide about your relationship with us going forward." I did think about it, for days afterward. I talked it over with my financial advisor, with a therapist I'd started seeing to process the family trauma. And eventually, I decided to accept. The cabin sold for just under $300,000. After paying off their remaining mortgage, my parents transferred the entire sum to my account. It was surreal, seeing that money there, more than I'd ever had at one time. It didn't erase the past, didn't heal all the wounds, but it was a tangible acknowledgement of what I'd given up. I used some of it to pay off my remaining student loans. I put some in retirement accounts, on my advisor's recommendation. And with the rest, I made a down payment on a small house with a yard, nothing extravagant, but mine, entirely mine. My relationship with my family is still evolving. There are still moments of resentment, flashes of anger when I remember the deception. But there's healing too. Dad's health has stabilized, and I visit weekly rather than daily. Mom has found a part-time job she enjoys, giving her purpose beyond caregiving. Ella graduated and is working as a therapist, and yes, she's now the one who flies home regularly to help out. Mike has maintained steady employment for almost a year now, has his own place, and recently started sending Mom and Dad a little money each month to help with expenses. As for me, I finished my bachelor's degree last month. My company immediately promoted me, with a significant salary increase. I'm dating someone I met in one of my classes, a woman who understands ambition and sacrifice. And for the first time in 15 years, I'm living my life for me. The other day, I was sitting on my back patio, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise. My phone pinged with a text from Ella, a photo of her and Mom cooking breakfast at our parents' house, with the caption "Wish you were here." And I realized something, I could be there if I wanted to. I could get in my car and drive over. But I was choosing to be where I was, in my own space, building my own life. The difference was that now it was truly a choice, not an obligation disguised as one. I'm not sure what the future holds for me or for my relationship with my family. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild, but I'm hopeful. Not just because of the monetary amends they've made, but because there's a new honesty between us. No more secrets, no more manipulation, no more taking advantage. For 15 years, I carried my family's burdens because I thought I had no choice. Now I know I always did. And knowing that has set me free.